Professor Dunbar is a leading anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist at Oxford University. You have more than 25 years of research on how humans form relationships, which is exactly what we want to talk about today. And you're very famous for Dunbar's number, which we will discuss as part of the 7 pillars of friendship. What we want to do in this recording is understand how humans form relationships and provide tangible advice on how people can form these relationships to help them both in their life and their career. So, Professor, I really want to discuss today the 7 pillars of friendship and how they apply in today's modern society that we live in and in the modern work environment that we have today.
So the big issue really is how we make and keep our important relationships, important social relationships. And usually, typically, those will consist both of family, extended family, and friends. As it happens, it's very clear if you come from a culture with very big families, you have a bigger extended family, you tend to have fewer friends. And we see that even within places like the United Kingdom, where family sizes are very, very small. People with big families have fewer friends. But still, the actual mechanisms involved in creating those friendships really revolve around trust. That's what underpins all these relationships. Now, at one level, just being a member of the same family creates some sense of obligation and trust. The family matters. You mustn't upset the family and all these kind of things.
Of course.
Otherwise, grandmother will be wagging her finger at you by her fireside. But in general, the way we seem to do this is in terms of what we call the 7 pillars of friendship, which seems they're like 7 dimensions of friendship, a bit like a supermarket barcode. But instead of being printed on our forehead, if you like, we speak them. They're things we say because they reflect who we are, the community we belong to, the community we grew up in, and our understanding of what it is to be a member of that community. And those 7 pillars are essentially speaking the same language, even better still, the same dialect. So you recognize somebody's dialect immediately for the dialect from your village where you grew up. You just know it. They are also include the location where you grew up, your career trajectory, the kinds of things you do. So we find that, for example, lawyers often have lawyers as friends. Medical people have medical people as friends. And this is because they have a common interest together. That's what forms that relationship. The other pillars are having the same hobbies and interests. Do you like football? Do you not like football? Having the same worldview, and worldview is the sort of composite of religious views, political views, moral views. It's how you look at the world and how you expect other people to behave, if you like. And then the last 2 are the interesting ones. They are what kinds of music do you like, and what kinds of humor do you like? What's your sense of humor? What kind of jokes do you prefer? Now, those 7 dimensions, the more of those you share with somebody, and this is as true of family members as it is of friends, the more of those 7 pillars you tick off with them, you're similar on, the stronger the relationship is with that person, and the more willing you are to be altruistic towards that person to help them out. So these are very, very strong effects, and they're part of a kind of mechanism underpinning friendship, which is known as homophily, from the Greek, ancient Greek, love of the same, right? So we prefer people who are very similar to us in the way they think and so on. And partly that's because it's just easier to have a conversation with them. You don't have to explain the joke. They get it straight away, even before you finish telling the joke. You know the same streets because you grew up on them. You maybe not at the same time, but do you remember so-and-so's coffee house there? Yeah, we used to drink there when we were kids, and all that kind of thing. Just creates this sense of belonging to a very, very small scale community. And in part, that's actually what it's referring back to, is an extremely small scale community. In traditional small scale society, hunter-gatherer societies, that would actually be an extended family, because that's about the right size. It takes you out to second cousins. But of course, in the modern world, we don't have such big families, we don't have so many cousins, and therefore we fill up the rest of that community with friends, and we define our friends still in terms of that kind of ancestral village community. It's a village, you know, it's a classic village size for forever. Back into European history, villages have been about that size.
And would it be, Professor, that when we engage with a person, first there is a state of exchanging information to better understand where we stand on, subliminally, of course, on these pillars?
Yes, you know, when we first meet somebody new, we devote a lot of time to them. We actually make special arrangements to try and meet them a little bit more often, and we spend a lot of time talking to them, checking out where they sit on the 7 pillars. And then once you've kind of figured that out and where they sort of sit on the 7 pillars, are they a 6-pillar person to you, or are they a 3-pillar person to you? And that determines where they lie in your social network. If they share 6 or 7 pillars, you want to keep them as a very, very best friend, and you then make arrangements to see them as often as possible. If they're a 3-pillar person, a 2-pillar person, they're going to sit somewhere out on the edges, and so you then sort of don't see them so often, and they naturally slide down to their kind of position they should occupy as a 2 or 3-pillar person. And that takes place quite quickly. You know, we only spend about a month after we first meet somebody, seeing them many times, or phoning them up, or to kind of assess this situation, and then we kind of go, okay, you know, I'm putting you in this slot, and then we see them then as appropriate for that slot.
And then how is it affected? How is this affected by the outside factors, like the fact that, like, maybe I have a project to be doing, so I'm going to bring in a bit of the workplace in here.
Sure.
But how is it affected by the fact that I might want to sell something to this person, or to partner, or if someone is a colleague and I need to get along? How is this relationship affected by this?
Well, at one level, that work project, if you like, is exactly one of the pillars. It's the career trajectory pillar. And, oh, you know, you work on such and such a topic too. Oh, well, you know, we must have been born friends already, because
yes,
we have that connection. And that connection will persist as long as we have that common interest, as it were. If we move on to other projects, then that are less closely related, then the relationship may die over time. But at least while that happens, people are willing to see each other. And you see this in what are called communities of practice, which have grown up in the business world, the world of administration, where people who have kind of common interests, say accountants or salespeople, or you know, some different speciality, programmers or something like that, they meet up from different businesses, different organizations, and they make these little sort of common interest groups where somebody may give a talk, or they just may meet to discuss how best to deal with these kinds of problems that we face in the business world. So that's just one reflection of the 7 pillars being implemented in real life and in the world of work, I think.
And could we actually now that we're living in a world where we need teams to be collaborating very effectively. We live in a very fast-paced world. Everyone's very busy. We're not spending enough time bonding and going out for drinks. I mean, we need to. I know that after the pandemic, people are doing it more and more, which is great. But if we were speaking to an employer, for example, I want to make it a bit practical. Are there aspects in work that you can encourage to actually help create better relationships between team members?
Sure. Just as a very important question, I think, because at the end of the day, the workplace is a social world. You know, it's not completely anonymous, and sort of pieces of paper turn up and are put on a desk and go home at 5 o'clock and never talk to each other. The world of work works because those people in it talk to each other, and they kind of try to make arrangements and do favors for each other across departments or whatever it may be. And the success with which that happens, the extent to which the place of work is like a village, that everybody's talking to each other and making arrangements and helping each other out, to the extent that that happens, so the organization, doesn't matter whether it's a government department or a business or what, hospital, you name it, if people talk to each other and are, if you like, our friends, get on with each other, it will work more efficiently. And if you look back in the history of industry in particular, back into over the last 100 years, 150 years, what you find with all the old, big, successful companies, you know, people like Unilever, when they were first founded as a family company, Cadbury's, the chocolate people, all these guys, the original founders of those companies recognized that having a happy kind of integrated workforce was good for business. And so they provided their employees with these kind of facilities. They all had social clubs. Even the railways famously, you know, had their social club at each sort of big station where there were a lot of employers. And they would have a tennis club and, you know, some sports facilities of other kinds. There would be debating clubs and social clubs with dances on Saturday nights, or maybe talks by interesting professors or whatever, to create this sense of community and bonding. And a lot of those things, you know, after the Second World War in the 1950s, these kind of died, these kind of social facilities provided on the factory site, because these were all, you know, right there on the factory site. You stayed behind after work and, you know, perhaps had a drink, or you went to some meeting or other, or played tennis with people in the summer. So that kind of thing kind of died, as I think people became maybe more family home oriented. Families were smaller, communities were more broken up. So you didn't live near your relatives and so on, didn't have those kind of networks. The family perhaps became more dominant. And you have to ask whether that was unfortunate, really, in terms of how effectively and how efficiently business organizations actually work, and whether we shouldn't try to reconstruct them. And, you know, a lot of modern businesses have tried to do that in various different ways. For example, the Gore-Tex, or the Gore company that manufactures Gore-Tex, you know, insists that their factories are not more than about 200 people, or their buildings. You know, never mind the factories, the administration blocks and so on. They all have this upper limit, because they figured out very, very early on that if you keep the unit small, everybody knows everybody else, and they therefore trust each other better. They do favors for each other. The thing works more efficiently. And similarly, I think you see in a lot of places like Silicon Valley, some of the big IT companies there, you know, try to arrange a kind of Wednesday evening beer fest or a barbecue or something in the center of the buildings, you know, in the open space. And of course, it's very nice and sunny there. It's like Greece. You can do this thing all through the year. You know, everybody just goes and gathers, maybe for an hour, maybe for 2 hours, you know, has a beer, a glass of wine, maybe a beef burger or whatever, you know, some food, go home. They just get the opportunity to talk to each other. And there's a very nice example, I think, of S.A.B. Miller, the big South African brewing giant, who amalgamated, that's the S.A.B. bit, amalgamated with Miller, the big American brewing giant that makes Miller Lite famously, and they became one company. But SAB Miller had this tradition right from the start with all their factories in the entrance of the main entrance into the building. There is a pub, and the pub is open just for an hour, maybe at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and people just casually go and stop by, have a beer with people, meet new people from another part of the factory, or if it's a kind of headquarters building, another department in the headquarters building, and get to build a kind of network of relationships. And I know people who have worked there. One of my co-authors on our new book actually worked for SAB Miller, and she said 20 years later, there are still Facebook groups from those
amazing
pub evenings, and this is not a big deal. It's not a big investment. After all, they were making beer all the time for the company, so they just had it available there. Maybe it's a microbrewery or something like that. It's a bar. Just go in, have a beer. People would just stop for one beer and go home. Just that little window to have the opportunity to meet new people and to kind of bond with the other people in the group. And certainly she thinks that was part of the success of that company. They were a very, very, or still are, I suppose, but in their original form, having started out as a very small brewing company, became a major player on the international sort of stock market.